Once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out to the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just mass and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the Graphic Novel Apostle.
Hello and welcome to the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I'm your host, Mark Orenberger, so happy to be here with you as always. Just a quick programming note before we get going this week. Next Monday morning, we'll have another one of our full episodes where I sat down with my friend Craig Brukardt to discuss Saga, Volume 1 from Image Comics, written by Brian K. Vaughan, with art by Fiona Staples. Now, I know some of you like to read along with us as we go into these books, and I've said on this show before that most of the books that we cover are probably PG-13 or R-rated books. Fair warning on this one. It's definitely not for kids, and it's probably not one you want to read in public, but it's a great book, and I look forward to you guys hearing that discussion that we had. And by the way, when I title those episodes that I've often referred to in the past as our full episodes, where I have a guest on and we discuss a full graphic novel or volume of a collected comics set, I think we're going to start labeling those as our book club episodes, and I may even go back and retitle the older episodes to reflect which ones are the book club episodes, which I've said before I think are really the heart and the soul of this podcast. It's just hard to produce them every week. Well, here we are, the week after Thanksgiving. I hope that you all had a wonderful opportunity to rest and relax over the last several days, that you had the opportunity to spend some time with friends and family, maybe some that you don't get to spend as much concentrated time with in your day-to-day life. And I hope you had some opportunity to reflect on those things that you were most thankful for in life that maybe we start to take for granted as we go about our everyday. I was raised in southern Connecticut, just outside of New Haven. My dad had grown up in and around Boston, and most of his side of the family still lived there. So every year on Thanksgiving during my childhood, we'd pile into the car on Thanksgiving morning, and we'd make the 3-hour or so drive up to Winthrop, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, where my grandparents lived. And every year when we'd arrive, we would find the same scene. My grandmother, Nana, would be in the kitchen cooking up Thanksgiving dinner, and my grandfather, Grandpa, or just Pa to my younger cousins, would be sitting in his armchair next to the television. Not across from the television, next to the television, and I never did know why that's where he chose his seat, but he'd be craning his neck around to look at the television and see the Macy's Day Parade. Now, I've never been one for parades. They're boring. There's a lot of standing around. In my experience in New England, they're cold, always cold, and the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. Frankly, I don't even really like watching them on television either. But there is something about those annual routines that can be special. And the big question was always, would we arrive at our grandparents' house in time for the big finale, to sit with Grandpa and watch the arrival of Santa Claus as he greeted the crowd? And I suppose this is really the kickoff to the Christmas season. And of course, for so many families, the very next day, after all the Thanksgiving leftovers have even been consumed, it's time to pull that dreaded cord and bring that rickety ladder down from the attic, climb up, and find all those dusty boxes with the Christmas decorations and the artificial tree. Bring them as carefully as possible down that ladder, trying not to break your neck along the way, and setting up for Christmas. I gotta be honest, that's always felt like rushing the season to me. It still feels like fall, it doesn't feel like winter. And frankly, as I've gotten older, I really want to let that spirit of Thanksgiving linger just a little bit longer before we start diving into all the rush and the excitement and the festivities that go along with Christmas time. But I also recognize that the calendar just doesn't allow for that many days between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and especially in a year like this one, where the Thanksgiving holiday comes just a little bit later on the November calendar. And I don't mean to sound like a humbug, but I also hate the chore of putting up the Christmas tree. This year something was just a little bit different, though. Regular listeners know that my son Garrett is 10 years old, and man, 10 years old is a pretty magical time for Christmas. I thought last year was really the sweet spot for childhood Christmas when he was just 9, but this year's shaping up to be as well. And the enthusiasm he had for putting up the Christmas tree this weekend and starting all of those Christmas traditions, listening to the music, talking about all the lights up in the neighborhood, you know, it even warmed this cold heart just a little bit. And so on Saturday evening, my wife and son and I got out all those decorations. We set up our Christmas tree, we hung the ornaments, and I was reminded that there really is a joy in unwrapping those ornaments from their paper or bags that you have them in, the ones that remind you of baby's first Christmas or a pet that has passed or first Christmas together as a couple. I guess the magic of the season has started working on me a little bit earlier than usual this year. And the town that I live in, Sherwood, Arkansas, does a beautiful, elaborate drive-through light display in one of our city parks. And usually we try to do that, just about a week or so before Christmas, maybe even in the final 4 or 5 days before Christmas, as one of those last big activities to really turn up the anticipation for the arrival of Santa Claus. But this year, Garrett couldn't wait. He wanted us to go Sunday evening. And so we did. Natalie and Garrett and I piled in the car. We put on the Christmas music and drove through the holiday festival of lights, which we'll surely do again before the holiday arrives. And then we went out and got some ice cream after. It was really a wonderful evening. And so, if we're going to go back to the routine of our normal lives for these next few weeks, going to work, going to school, working in, shopping, and other holiday-related errands, as well as the parties and the gatherings and, of course, the cleaning that goes along with it to get ready and to put things back together afterward, we might as well go into it with some holiday cheer. And so that's what I want us to do this week on this mini episode of the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I want to bring to you just one story that I read this weekend that, just kind of warmed the heart. So today we're going to go back to December of 2008 for Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, number 46. This is an all-ages comic. It was written by Todd Dezago. Pencils were done by Robert Castro. Inks by Greg Adams and Kris Justice. Colors by Sotocolor's A Street. Lettered by Dave Sharpe. And with cover art by Francis Tsai. And then also credited as Skottie Young. Although as I look at the cover, it doesn't look like Skottie Young's art to me. And I do see Francis Tsai's signature on it. Now maybe Skottie Young did the colors, or maybe there was a variant cover that he was being credited for here. It's not really clear in the information that's either in the book or that I could find online. But it is a fun cover, showing Spider-Man flying across the city, leaping off of a chimney, with a stocking cap and matching scarf around his neck. And of course this book comes from Marvel Comics. Now, as always, we'll put up some samples of both the cover and the interior art on our Instagram page at Graphic Novel Apostle, and I hope you'll go over there and check that out, as it'll maybe make the story a little bit richer to get a sense of the art as well. This particular story was titled Silent Nights, and the first big splash page that opens the issue shows Spider-Man tearing the fake beard off of a phony Santa Claus who has his back to us, and Spider-Man exclaiming, "You?" This isn't exactly the start of our story, but really just a little foreshadow of the things to come. But we've got these couple of narrative boxes at the very beginning that say, "What's that you say, true believer? You were expecting a heartwarming holiday tale and not some sensational Spider-Man Santa smackdown? Well, put another log on the fire and get yourself a nice cup of hot cocoa, because this is one Yuletide yarn you're not going to want to miss." I just love a fun introduction like that. Well, the story itself opens with a freezing Spider-Man up on a rooftop complaining about how cold he is. It's 2 days before Christmas, and even though he's out there in the frigid cold, he's swinging around over the city streets, and he's looking down, and he's seeing all the people going from store to store where the buildings are all decorated, and he notes that even though New Yorkers have a reputation for being tough, there is something special about this time of year where peace on earth and goodwill toward men can actually be seen in the populace. Well, as he's flying along, he starts to notice something that's going to recur several times throughout this issue, and that is, with the air being so cold, his webbing fluid is starting to congeal and gum up a little bit on him, making it harder to spin out his webs and have them land where he wants, and just work the way he's normally used to them working. Now, in something that we just don't see anymore in comics, so much of the narration in this comic comes through thought bubbles that lead from Spider-Man's head to one of those cloud-shaped balloons that tell us what he's thinking. And what he's got on his mind this evening, 2 nights before Christmas, is his Aunt May. Now, I know that not everybody who listens to this podcast is deeply versed in comic lore, and frankly, I suppose I'm not that deeply versed in every single character either. But I think most people are familiar with the backstory that at a very young age, Peter Parker, Spider-Man's parents were killed or taken away somehow. They're no longer in the picture. And so he's been left to be raised by his Aunt May and his Uncle Ben. And of course, around the time as a teenager that he first gets his powers, Uncle Ben is killed, but not before teaching Spider-Man the lesson that with great power comes great responsibility. And so Peter Parker's elderly Aunt May is the one constant that remains through him in his life, serving as his mother figure, his friend, and as a constant source of love. Well, on this particular evening, Spider-Man is sulking, sitting up on a rooftop, thinking about what he could do for his Aunt May for Christmas, and realizing that he doesn't have a present for her yet, or any way to show her exactly how much that he loves her. As he's considering this, he thinks back to a Christmas several years earlier when he was just an adolescent, when his Uncle Ben was still living, and Peter and Ben and May had a warm and lovely Christmas together. And one of the things that Peter remembers so well was that his Uncle Ben gave Aunt May for Christmas this particular year a Christmas angel figurine, and it was just something that was touching to May, that she cried when she received it because she thought it was so beautiful, and it was something that she cherished. And so Peter remembers that every year this Christmas angel would be brought out and placed on the mantle, and of course, after the death of Uncle Ben, it would be placed on the mantle next to a framed picture of Uncle Ben. Well, 1 year before our current story takes place, Aunt May accidentally knocked that Christmas angel off of the mantle, and it smashed on the floor. Peter says she cried so much, it was as if she shattered her memories of Uncle Ben, and she was so sad. And so sitting on this rooftop in the present, Peter comes to a realization. The greatest gift he could get for her would be to find a way to replace that statue. And sure enough, he finds one online. It sells for $100. And the only problem is, our now high school-age Peter Parker says he's going to come up about $99 short, unless he can snag some photos of Spider-Man, his alter ego, taking out some bad guys and sell them to the Daily Bugle sometime in the next day or so. And so, determined to have this gift for his Aunt May, Peter takes to the streets in his Spider-Man costume, and exhibiting the classic Spider-Man traits. He knows that he's running behind and getting a gift for his aunt. He feels guilty about that. He feels guilty that he can't do something more for her. And of course, he's got that old Parker luck, and so there's just no crime going on out on the streets that he could spring into action and catch some pictures of himself. And of course, then he starts to feel guilty about the fact that he's lamenting that there's no crime going on. Switching out of costume and back into his Peter Parker attire, Peter goes by the offices of the Daily Bugle where they're having their holiday party and goes in and speaks to the editor-in-chief, J. Jonah Jameson, and asks whether there's anything he can do, any kinds of pictures that he might be able to take as a freelance job to earn some money before Christmas. And unfortunately, there just really isn't a need in this short amount of time before Christmas. But while he's there in the offices of the Daily Bugle, he overhears one of the reporters at the holiday party talking about how there's been a Santa imposter who's been committing robberies all over the city. It's Christmas Eve by this point, but in one last desperate hope, Peter goes back out in his Spider-Man attire, swings around the city, looking out for this Santa robber, in hopes that he can not only stop this crime spree, but maybe also get some pictures that he could sell to the paper. Well, there are a couple of mishaps along the way. First, Spider-Man sees a Santa Claus running down the street with a giant bag over his shoulder, and so he ties him up and makes a big scene, webbing this guy in front of all these onlookers, only to discover that his sacks were stuffed with nothing but pillows, and that this man was actually just someone who was going to go to a retirement home where he was going to make an appearance as Santa Claus. Well, with that embarrassment aside, next, he spots someone climbing into the window off of a fire escape, dressed as Santa Claus. He knows this has to be his opportunity. And so, he webs and trips up this man going into the window, only to discover that this is just a father who is dressed up as Santa, bringing in presents, trying to make Christmas a little more exciting for his own kids. And to patch things over with this father who he's just assaulted in his own home, Spider-Man has to act like the dad had arranged for him to come and make an appearance, and then go outside of the building and do some stunts to impress the children, swinging through the air from one building to the other. Well, just as Spider-Man has given up all hope, third time's the charm. He sees another Santa Claus fleeing from a department store with a bag of treasures over his shoulder. Spider-Man chases him down into an alley, catches the man, unmasks him, and it's none other than Doc Ock, one of Spider-Man's greatest foes. Except Spider-Man immediately realizes there's something fishy about that. He had just captured Doc Ock last week and he should be in prison. And so, we have an even further reveal. This is just a Doc Ock mask that another villain named Chameleon is wearing. Chameleon's a master of disguise, of course. Having startled Spider-Man, Chameleon tries to flee the scene, and Spider-Man knows that if Chameleon gets away and back out into the crowd on the street, he'll find a way to don a disguise and blend in. Now, in trying to web up Chameleon as he's fleeing, What Spider-Man does instead is accidentally just spit that gummy spider goo out of his web shooters and all over the face of the chameleon. His spiderwebbing fluid is obviously still feeling the effects of this cold weather. Well, as luck would have it, having been blinded by this goo, Chameleon runs headfirst into a wall and knocks himself unconscious. And Peter was able to get some pictures along the way. He returns to the offices of the Daily Bugle and discovers that he's too late. Even though he's got the pictures that he wanted to sell to the newspaper, everybody's gone home for the holiday, and there's not going to be an opportunity to sell those photos. And so he goes back home and back to his room, and he sits there in front of his desk and starts to sulk and thinks about how he's going to have let his Aunt May down that he just wanted so badly to make happy for Christmas. And he looks over on his desk at the box that contains the remains of the Christmas angel that shattered last year, and he realizes that this gummed-up webbing solution could actually be an excellent adhesive. And so he has an idea. Rather than try and replace the Christmas angel of old, he takes that gummy webbing and uses it to piece Aunt May's original Christmas angel back together, wrap it up, and have it for her in time for Christmas the next morning. Aunt May opens this and she breaks down into tears. She's so happy. And she and Peter stand in their living room and just share a hug in a really touching scene, with that Christmas angel maybe a little bit worse for the wear, but still back into its Christmas angel form and back on the mantle next to a portrait of Uncle Ben. And as a happy little addition, Aunt May points out to Peter that there were still some Christmas cards that they hadn't opened yet. And one of them was from the Daily Bugle, sent by J. Jonah Jameson himself, and it included a Christmas bonus for $250. And so even though that money didn't come into Peter's hands in time to be used for a gift for Aunt May, we're reminded that even the coldest hearts in someone like J. Jonah Jameson can be warmed just a little bit at Christmas time. Guys, as I was reading through this issue, it really did get me in the mood for Christmas. I turned on the fireplace as I was reading, and maybe I was just already in the right frame of mind for a, sappy but sweet story like this to kind of touch me. Well, as we go through the weeks ahead, I hope you all have a very happy, safe, healthy, wonderful holiday season. I will look forward to coming back next week with our conversation discussing Saga Volume 1 with my friend Craig Brukardt, and until then, keep reading those comics.